Welcome to Console Room 2022, Satellite 9, and we're covering the episode known as Eve of the Daleks. Panelists, would you introduce yourselves, starting with Michael?
Hi, Michael Zecca. I'm on a ton of panels at Console Room this year virtually because I'm not attending in person. Feel free to come chat with me on the Discord during the con if you want. Kathy and I have already done a panel about the recent season, The Flux. And so if you're curious about that, you can catch that at a different point in the schedule. We are recording this one on January 2nd, right the day after the anniversary, or the New Year's special aired.
Alexander?
Hi, I'm Alex Seymour. I will be attending the convention in person along with my 5-year-old, my wife, and please step by my wife's knitting panel where you can, or more of a workshop, because that is always fun.
And I'm Catherine Sullivan. I write YA fantasy. I've got to promote books that'll be available because I've got essays and Children of Time, Companions to Doctor Who, Outside In. And the synopsis for this panel is: what's better than ringing in the new year with the Doctor? What did we think of the episode? What are we looking to see in the 2022 specials? And so since we did already cover the Flux in another panel, Alexander, Alex, you want to start off with your synopsis of the previous season leading into this?
So the prior season was about the Flux, pretty much Sontaran based, pretty much end of the universe. The Doctor has to confront her past with the Division, a shadowy organization set upon resetting the entire universe. It was a fun season, maybe not the best season, maybe not the most logical season, pretty chaotic, but it was fun. I enjoyed this season more than I enjoyed the other 2 Whittaker seasons. And so off of that 6-part chaotic episode, we are now coming to sort of the cleanup to the New Year special, which is going to be the first of Jodie Whittaker's final 3 episodes. And we know this because it has been announced that they are done filming.
Michael?
Well, again, just to connect the New Year's special to the Flux season we just saw, obviously at the beginning of the plot, the Doctor's doing kind of a little reboot to the TARDIS to clean up the mess that the Flux left the TARDIS in at the end of the last season. So that does make a connection there. And there are also some repercussions. I was not sure at the end of the Flux season if we would have any long-lasting effect of what happened with the Sontarans and Daleks and Cybermen. And the Daleks made pretty clear here that they were devastated during the Flux and they're mad at the Doctor for this. And this is why they're after her now.
I'll say that's plot contrivance. The dialects are always coming back. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's yeah.
Well, in the Chibnall era, they've always come back in the New Year specials, which I have to say I have been enjoying that. I like not having them cluttering up the season. Honestly, it's kind of nice that they come after the season and are their own separate thing. I also like, as our recording engineer has also mentioned, having the specials on New Year's rather than Christmas. A lot of the Christmas specials to me were pretty fluffy and not very satisfying. And I was very worried coming into this New Year's special based on the ads we were seeing that this was going to be a fluffy story. And while it starts off looking that way, it gets better as it goes. One difference from the previous Dalek New Year specials, though, is that the other 2 really got into the body horror aspect of the Daleks, and these did not.
Yeah, this got more into the time.
Yes.
And it's a crunchy thing to go into. And I did like the fact that, because also one of the questions I had at the end of our other panel about the Flux, was the TARDIS healed? And now we know it wasn't, and it is going to be at the end of this episode. So where do we want to start? Because I have a whole bunch of favorite quotations from this episode. I do that a lot.
Well,
and
I
lots
thought
of my favorite scenes. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to before we get into those little nitty gritty details, I just thought I'd mention to those fans who came in with the new series that don't know the classic series well, that the time loop concept was established back in the classic series and long before Bill Murray's Groundhog Day came out. And there were other science fiction works that existed before Doctor Who did this, but specifically 2 instances I can think of in the classic series, if you want to go back and see the time loop put to use, are the Armageddon Factor, which is the last story in the first Big Umbrella season, the Tom Baker Key to Time season. And the other would be in Meglos, which was another Tom Baker story not long after that.
In kind of in the Space Museum one, but
Mhm.
not quite
Yeah.
quite a time loop, but
Yeah. But the whole concept also of like learning with each loop and learning how to break out of it was very much in place with the time loop at Meglos.
because as we discover as the time loop goes on, this is not a Groundhog Day.
Mhm.
The changes that you make, if you timed it perfectly, still happen. For example, Sarah first notices the elevator being on the 2nd floor, but the 3rd go around, the lift is already at the 5th floor. So there's things that you can change, and she was already worried about another thing that we'll get to. So favorite scenes, favorite overall synopsis. What do you guys want to go with this? You want to do overall impression first and then break down the scenes, or?
So this is my impression. This was Chibnall doing second-rate Moffat. And I love Moffat and even second-rate Moffat. And so I quite enjoyed it. The difference here is that maybe the story was better, the romance to work better, but the internal logic just was not as crisp, as neat as Moffat did. So Moffat can do timey-wimey just beautifully. He can put together a little puzzle, and sometimes he gets too enamored with the puzzle. The puzzle was a little bit sloppy. I enjoyed it, but it was not perfect.
Michael?
I think that's a fair assessment, Alex. I mean, but I really enjoyed this one. I went expecting this to be a bit fluffy, and I often don't enjoy Dalek stories. And I think this one played out quite nicely. One thing I really appreciated, not only are, Sarah and Nick learning as the loops go on and learning about each other and developing this relationship, not only are the Doctor and his companions, learning as they go and getting better at it, the Daleks are learning as they go as well, and they're having to counter that. It's a chess game. It's not just, like when Tom Baker was breaking out of a time loop, just figuring out, keep trying and finding a way out, which was Bill Murray Groundhog Day. In this case, it was a back and forth. They would learn, then they would learn, so they had to compensate for that, and it was on and on.
And my problem is Moffat to me is not as spectacular as Alex seems to think, but every showrunner is different. I really liked the writing for this. Michael, you wanted to mention the new actors, Sarah and
actually I don't know.
Was that Alex?
Might have been Alex. Me. Yeah.
Okay.
No, so I'm gonna remember her name, but Aisling Bea. She is a Irish stand-up comic. I don't think she does a whole lot of acting. I think she mainly does stand-up. But if you want to see more of her work, I would strongly recommend watching her season of Taskmaster. Taskmaster is a weird little competition show where they get comedians to perform pointless tasks in unique ways. No, it's a thing. Either you're going to enjoy it or not. And yeah, just she mainly does stand-up comic. I know nothing about the other guy, Solomon, but but B, like I said, I know her as a stand-up comic, and I was really quite pleasantly surprised by how good of an actress she is.
Just in terms of actors, I wanted to say this. If we look at this story, we have 5 main actors in the story, plus 3 Dalek operators, if you count that, plus 1 cameo at the end that could have been very easily filmed on its own. This was a story that was easy to film with pandemic restrictions. It's very easy to create a small pod, keep the 2 guest stars with the TARDIS crew and some of the usual, Doctor Who crew and supporting cast, and make that work. So yeah, I mean, even more so than the Flux, I think they really did a great job here of utilizing what limitations they were working within.
Yeah, so just a little bit off topic, but as long as we're on it, John Bishop, he's also known mainly as a stand-up comic.
Mhm.
Any dramatic roles you want to point us to, or is it just? I know he's done a little formal acting.
He's mainly done comedy and hosting a number of, reality shows and game shows and things, is my understanding. And he spent a little bit of time as a professional footballer earlier in his career, from what I understand. Talking about John Bishop, though, I will say this: on the Flux panel that Kathy and I did have some concern and criticism of Dan as a companion, because within the Flux season, he doesn't really feel like much of one, but he really does feel more like a Doctor Who traveling companion in this one. He's much more engaged in the plot, not just there for comic relief like he seemed to be a lot of the time in the Flux. And that time he spent with Yaz in the previous season is coming into play. They developed a friendship off screen that is really coming into play now. And there's a certain maturity and wisdom that he's bringing to the role as an older actor that we didn't really see last season as well. So I'm liking this version of Dan a lot more.
Yes, no, I mean, for the Flux, I understood why Dan was there. He was kidnapped. He was forced into this.
Yeah.
At an emotional level, I just don't understand why Dan is in the story. For me, he seems to be very much a Liverpool homebody. So why is he on the road? Yes, his house got shrunk. Yes, he doesn't have a whole lot of ties, but the fact that he hangs at the Liverpool Museum, and apparently his house is within sight of the Liverpool football stadium, suggests that he's a homebody. So I love Bishop. I'm just trying to sort of puzzle out that emotional nut on why he's actually on the road.
Well, if you want a cynical look at it, his cupboards were bare and his house is gone, and the TARDIS has a food replicator.
And I had basically turned him down for a date. I mean, she's probably going to be getting, but in the meantime, they invited him to come along, and he would.
And he did spend 3 or 4 years in the past with Yaz, and perhaps he's feeling like he needs to look out for her a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That probably is the strongest argument I've heard yet. But
yeah.
So favorite scenes, or just do we want to go through the entire episode? Because
there's a beautiful fourth wall breaking moment early in the episode that had me shouting at the screen.
Probably the same one I am.
Yes, it's when the Dalek says, "I am not Nick." And I'm like, you
Briggs.
are literally Nick Briggs. And also very possibly Nicholas Pegg in the suit. There were 3 Dalek operators, one of whom was Nicholas Pegg. So yeah. That
But
just
it could have been
was
the other Dalek operator. We don't know.
Could have been Barnaby, or could have been one of the others. Yeah, but it was hilarious. It would be that much more hilarious if it was Nick Pegg and Nick Briggs saying, "I am not Nick." It's just the irony of that.
Because that whole thing's like, in Nick Briggs' voice.
Yes.
That was just priceless.
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
For me, it was not a particularly Doctor Who moment. but when they're discussing whether or not Nick is a serial killer or not.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
The two
you-
women looking at each other like, you're weird.
it's not particularly Doctor Who, but it was a well-written moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the line is, you have a lot of ex-girlfriends. They're alive still, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, especially with the names and the dates, it did feel very much like a
And a
serial
lot of
killer's
shoes.
trophies. Yeah, it did feel a lot like a serial killer's trophies. I mean, I've seen Dexter's slide kit. It felt a little like that at first. I have to say this about that room, something that actually took me a little bit out of the episode. I've rented a large storage unit before. This storage unit was larger than any storage unit I have rented, and just the cost of the size of that unit just boggles my mind. He lives in a tiny little flat that's practically a box, but yet he's got this giant storage unit, which must be costing £1,000 a month to rent. And then he's got it full of shelving units, which he would have had to have purchased as well. And they're practically bare. There's so little, there's so much space wasted in there. I'm used to storage units being packed very tightly and efficiently. So that took me out of the moment a little bit.
It did not for me. It was, I think, relatively well explained that this was a failing storage unit thing. Hard to manage a storage unit place actually failing, but then I don't know the hoarding tendencies of the British. But no, it's not self-storage, it's elf storage.
Yes,
because
it's fallen off.
Because the S has fallen off and they don't have enough money to put the S back on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got the impression that the fact that, oh, who's a non-existent employee who took over an entire, yeah.
Oh, Jeff took over whole
Yeah.
floors and was living there.
Yes, I mean,
He had one unit that was just beef and beans cans.
3 years out of date.
Yeah, 40 pence a piece. They were like the bargain bin ones. So yeah. And then fireworks and all. It's interesting at the beginning when Nick is asking her to remind him of all the different things you're not allowed to have in the unit. I didn't catch that it was Jeff putting things in all those other units till later. I was thinking it was Nick because she rattles off all the different things as well. I don't have a shop. And if you look at all the different things in the building, there's everything but a shop in there.
Yeah.
so going back to, I do know self-storage units which do operate like that.
Yeah,
they're in rural Minnesota, rural Iowa, where we've had some depopulation, like a school that got turned into a storage unit. Yeah, so there's stuff like out there. Let's say I'm not sure about Manchester. It would have to be like ex-suburbs, but anyway, no, that did not take me out of the moment.
But there were so many good lines and classic second Doctor quotation. Oh my giddy aunt.
Mhm,
Sarah says, I was just
mhm.
perfect.
Yeah.
You actually hear that uttered in the wild. That was just wonderful. Favorite scenes, favorite quotes. I've got a bunch of them, so I want to give you guys a chance.
Go
Or
for
do
it.
you-
Yeah, I don't know that there were a lot of specific lines that stuck out for me as much as the "I am not Nick" line, although, and it's got its good parts and its bad parts of this, but the whole bit with Dan confronting Yaz about her feelings about the doctor, and then confronting the doctor with it, and as some people have said online, it wasn't his place to tell the doctor.
Mhm.
So that was a little cringy.
Yeah, it was. It's not
On
his place to out her. It's like, no.
that being said, the doctor is pretty oblivious to a lot of things in this regeneration, and admits to this. In season 12, there's that bit with Graham where he is talking about his fear of the cancer returning, and she says to him, "I'm supposed to say something helpful at this point, aren't I? But I'm just going to walk over here by the TARDIS and think for a minute and then hope I say the right thing after thinking about it for a bit." And they just kind of leave it on that. And like Graham accepts that as the helpful thing having it said, because he understands she's got an emotional limitation there. This doctor has an interesting blind spot when it comes to emotional intelligence.
I think it's more than that. I mean, it's just not this episode. It's not just, it's been in all 3 seasons. Yaz is, I think, much more invested in the relationship with the doctor. She wants to be, a co-member of the doctor. This was sort of the first time it was sort of romantic that was hinted at, but she's always been much more engaged. And on the other hand, the doctor's always sort of treated her a little bit like a pet, a little bit condescending. I don't have time for you. I'm trying to remember what the quote was that really ticked from this episode. Are we having a conversation now? We're not having this conversation now. What was that quote? I'll see if I can find it, but it was just really condescending. Because it's an unequal power dynamic there.
Flip side of that, though, when Dan does out Yaz to the doctor's initial response is like, I don't know what you mean. And he's like, yes, you do. And she's like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. And you can see this pain look on her face. And when we think back to some of the last few incarnations, the doctor has gotten very close to some companions and then been torn away. I mean, look at the lengths he went to with Clara, and then erased his own memory of her. And it could well be that this doctor, much as she may like Yaz and have feelings, doesn't want to invest in that relationship because she doesn't want the pain again. Because at some point they won't be together anymore, whether it's old age or Daleks or whatever.
Because I mean, the 10th Doctor was explaining to Rose how they really couldn't be close.
Yeah. And even explains this to Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion when they see each other. We've had this kind of repeatedly in the Russell era and the Moffat era, that the Doctor has these close relationships with people, but doesn't want to get too close.
Because it hurts them when they have to leave.
Also, Yaz has been pressing the Doctor for 3 seasons now to open up about the stuff that's going on with the division and the Master and all of this. And she still keeps things close to the chest, and it annoys Yaz. Even at the end of the story, she's trying to mend some fences, but she's still holding back on things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, let's go look off for the treasure of blah, 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 instead of talking about my feelings or what's happened to me or what I did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I did like that both Nick and Dan had moments of cleverness where Nick knew to duck at the right time.
Oh, and Dan dancing around that Dalek. Oh my God, that was amazing.
Perfect.
Almost as good as running upstairs.
Yeah.
Well, it reminded me a little bit of those scenes in Destiny of the Daleks where Tom Baker's doctor defeated a Dalek with a hat, but done better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just price. They did it so well. It's like, because both Yaz and the Doctor had been killed by 2 Daleks shooting at the same time, I expected them to try that. But then when Nick did it, the Daleks didn't expect it, which means that then Yaz and Dan couldn't do it because the Daleks would have been expecting that to happen. Because they're running.
And when Dan did go to dance with the Dalek, when he was leaving the Doctor and Yaz and heading up there, he knew he was going to sacrifice himself. And the Doctor was like, whoa. And this was like a maturity moment as a companion. He was willing to, give himself up to protect them. That was a nice moment for him. And this is some of what was solidifying Dan as a companion for me finally in this story. And the way the whole dancing around the Dalek scene went, and then the Dalek finally realizing, and Dan like, yeah, it took you long enough. John Bishop was really getting to use his comic timing well in that scene as well. So they were utilizing his skills well too. instead of just making wisecracks all through the season like they did with the Flux.
Oh, all those beautiful puns with walks. I just loved him with that.
Yeah.
Just walking out here.
Also by Sarah actually starting to realize that Nick cared for her because he was sacrificing himself. So we're having those self-sacrificing moments.
Yeah. Yeah, and then her feeling guilty that she didn't do the same.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you remember a couple loops back when you said that you were coming to find me and I told you I was coming to find you. I wasn't. I was actually trying to find a way out through the basement, and I was trying to find a weapon and it didn't work. And he's like, well, that's okay. That was still a good strategy.
Because if you found a weapon, you would come back to rescue me.
Yeah.
He's very forgiving.
Yeah. That being said, when it comes to Nick, there are some cringy moments with him. He's been stalking her for 3 years because he's got a crush and doesn't know how to say anything about it. And then she hooks up with him anyway after finding out of this. And yeah, I know there's a lot of women that were watching this that did not take kindly to that.
Yeah. I know it's supposed to be a rom-com, but stalking this is just.
It's
a trope in rom-coms that
yeah,
people really dislike.
Yeah, it's been overdone so many times.
I don't think he was stalking her, but then again, if you've got a long distance unrequited love, which I would classify this as stalking, and we could parse the differences between them later.
Mhm.
I just have a really hard time imagining that after a highly stressful event, such as riding on a bus going over 55 miles an hour for a couple of hours, that all of a sudden love blossoms. No, it doesn't happen like that. I was a little disappointed with the gooey, happy ending at the end. But that's how television works. So
I also, again, going back to the size of the storage unit and how much it must have cost to rent that, and how he and Sarah go running off traveling the world after all this. I'm thinking he's got a lot more money than he's letting on for living in such a small flat. And I'm just wondering, what's his backstory? Where is this money coming from? He's had all these girlfriends. He's got this big storage unit. He's got the money to go off traveling with her. I mean, unless they're using the insurance money from the storage place or something. I mean, I'm just wondering what's his deal?
Yeah.
And in that, I was wondering, has he been paying Jeff off every New Year's Eve? He's been saying he knew to come then because that was the time when Jeff would let her down and leave her in the lurch working there by herself. But has he been paying Jeff off to go out on New Year's Eve and leave her in the lurch so they would have that time alone? I don't know.
If
That's sneaky for him.
If that is true, if he's been paying off Jeff,
Mhm.
then let me assure you, many of those girlfriends are not alive right now.
Mm.
Oh dear. I don't know. Yeah, stalkerish, but
And what is the deal with Jeff? Oh my gosh, all the stuff he's got stored in there, and some of them explosives, and some, I mean, he has all kinds of weird stuff stored in there, and taking over the building, which, yes, okay, it was a failing storage unit, so he could put stuff in there, but where is he getting all this stuff, and what is he up to? Who is this Jeff person?
really.
I know enough people like that who are sort of running a freelance axeman sort of, it's
Black market, whatever, running out of the storage unit, right?
or gray market.
Yeah.
But freewheeling capitalism on the edges. Now that I'm perfectly okay with that. The
Maybe he was
romance,
just
not so much, but
maybe Jeff was just stockpiling for Brexit and took it a little too far.
Got carried away because I mean, those cans of beef and beans were really 3 years out of date, according to the doctor.
Mhm.
But there were so many cool lines. But again, a lot of times because I don't have turning on caption. I have to listen to them several times to realize that, oh, yes, it said, hey, you, no dissing my mate. That's my job. Thanks, Sheffield. Shh. That was cute. They're still having that Sheffield Liverpool rivalry going
Well,
on.
there was also a bit, and I can't remember whether it was Jeff or Sarah or one of the Daleks was putting Dan down, and
It was one of the
she's
Daleks.
like, yeah, and she's like, yo, wait a minute. Dissing the Scouse is my job. You can't do it. It's not cool.
That's
Not cool to do it to my friend. I do that.
Yeah. Hey, you, no dissing my mate. That's my job.
Yeah.
But it's also the time when the Dalek was telling Dan that inferior human, and who are you
Yes.
calling inferior?
Yeah, that's right. And she says, hey, that's my job, not yours.
Oh, she basically
Yeah.
said, smart Dalek.
Yeah.
Again, there's just so many good lines, because that's why I like this writing so much, because
Mhm.
you had at least 3 comedians on the show and they were given really good lines, and the
Yeah.
time is just perfect.
Wait, I'm counting 2. We've got B, we've got
Bishop
Bishop, who's the third?
I thought Solomon was.
Solomon, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's again, because BBC America does this stupid thing of cutting off credits. I had to go online to find out that the guy who's watching the fireworks at the end was Johnny Dixon, who played Carl,
Mhm.
the woman who fell to earth.
Yep.
So he's now moved from Sheffield to Manchester.
Mhm. So Carl was the crane operator at the end of that story, but he was also on the train at the beginning.
Mhm.
There is a scene where Yaz is asking him his name and taking it down in her book. It was Carl something Wright, as I recall. Mhm. And his
Yeah,
dad owned the
Morgan.
crane company, as I recall.
Mhm.
Yes.
He was
The one
actually
who-
afraid of heights, but he was working up there anyway. So maybe up in Manchester, he's not working in a crane anymore. Maybe
But
he's
he was
working on the ground.
fairly high up to be able to watch the fireworks.
Yeah.
But it was still, he was basically thinking, oh, the fireworks are for me,
Yeah.
because he's looking around and nobody else is watching.
Yeah. That was a good line. It was like, great. It was a great show
Great
or great display. And he looks around like, well, just for me then. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, okay, this is me being weird and linking things, because he was around when the Doctor first appeared,
Hmm.
and now they have him at the end of the New Year's episode. Does that mean that the regeneration is going off in the next specials? Is the regeneration not going to take place on Earth in the current time period, or?
Certainly,
Or
it could be more
will-
foreshadowing of the coming regeneration as we have had in the last couple of episodes.
Or
Alex?
will he become the next Doctor? There has been a history of
Mhm.
cameos. No, but
No.
that's the only thing I might see. But
Cool.
Now our engineer mentions that you had much more trouble with how much of a nasty person Sarah was towards Nick. And yeah, it was kind of irritating that she was really, but you could kind of get it that she was irritated with Jeff leaving her in the lurch. She has to deal with this guy who comes in every New Year's Eve. But yeah, she was rather snippy.
Well, and especially on the second or third loop too, she was a little extra snippy with Jeff because they kind of had this conversation already, and Nick, sorry, yeah, and she hadn't quite caught on to what's going on yet, but she knew something was out of sorts, and he was reacting a little differently as well because he was also trying to put the pieces together, but they didn't have all the pieces right in their minds yet.
But
So
she did
there
have
was
kind
some
of reaction.
irritation.
Yeah, she did
Yeah.
have the reactions like, oh, did I say that out loud type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So she was starting to realize how she was behaving towards him.
Right. And that's where on the subsequent loops, she started to then improve that relationship with him. Yeah. And improve the way she acted around him. Where they're quite friendly later on. Yeah.
Especially after he sacrifices himself for them.
Yeah.
Oh, it's And as she says to them, there's some family members and friends that wouldn't do something like that for her.
Mhm. Well, and speaking of nastiness, there's a moment where the doctor snaps at Yaz, and Yaz doesn't take it well.
Mhm.
And then the doctor stops and kind of apologizes that, like, no, it's just a stressful time and I need you to do this. And I really value and go, please take care of this.
Mhm.
I trust you to be able to take lead. And then when Yaz gets upstairs to do what she's supposed to do, she kind of snaps at Nick and Sarah the same way. It's like,
Mhm.
come on, we got to go.
Well, what about the plan? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it did take a while for me to realize that the thing that the timing, okay, the timing has been shortened, that the doctor points out right away.
Mhm.
But the way that the idea that they can actually move things in the previous round and have things stay there because the time has been shortened.
Mhm.
But it was basically, it spelled out a little more for me when Sarah was pointing out that if Nick had died in that particular round, he wouldn't be back the
Right.
next one. So
Yeah.
it's
And
not actually Groundhog Day. It's more like
right.
one of those different time loops. Somebody else online was comparing to Russian Doll, which I haven't
Well,
seen.
Armageddon Factor, the time loop was shrinking as well,
Ah.
as I recall.
Mhm.
It was like decaying, basically. It was an unstable energy thing, and so it was a nice touch, really. That it did step up the danger and stuff with each pass. But having gone back and rewatched the episode a few times, they are dropping hints of that right from the get-go. The first couple of times you see Sarah, she's looking at her phone and the time on the phone. And we can see on the first couple of loops 8 minutes before, 7 minutes before. So they're doing the Chekhov's gun on the mantelpiece thing, so that it pays off later.
But what kind of bugged me about that was because she was getting all these notifications really loudly, but she wasn't getting them later when they were hiding from the Daleks. But at that time she should have. So like, okay, something got dropped there. Or had the doctor fixed the phone by that point? No, that was the last round that the doctor did something to the phone.
Yeah.
So that it would activate the ignition.
Like I was mentioning earlier, it's second-rate Moffat.
Let's not do comparisons of showrunners like that, because I have a aversion to Moffat, and saying second-rate Moffat means like, no, sorry.
I'm referring specifically to him as a writer under like R.T. Davis, where his stories were just really, really crisp. I like the idea of this. I just wish that there was just one more pass through the script to clean up the errors, as you're pointing out.
Collaboration with a female writer, like he's done on a few other stories, might have been good to take out some of the cringy moments too.
I guess so. Another problem is that I just recently watched the film Tenet, which I thought was brilliant.
I thought it was contrived.
I would argue that almost any puzzle
Christopher
box.
Nolan film.
So the great thing about Tenet is that it is the best Nolan film out there. It's the most Nolan of all Nolan films out there. And if you like Nolan, then this is a great film. And if you don't like Nolan, you don't. But the point being is that film, the internal time travel logic had a real crispness to it. There was no edges. It was just beautifully put together. With this one, it was good idea. Just need another pass on the execution, just to make everything tight.
Well, and speaking of that, looking at this with a mind that has studied general relativity and quantum mechanics and so on, Sarah's mom has got to be a part of this loop somehow. Otherwise, we're creating branching timelines with each loop. Yes, she calls it 4 minutes to midnight on every pass except the last one, but the conversation diverges each time because Sarah is experiencing the loop and learning from it. So we're given the impression with the little force field on the door and everything that the loop is contained to the building. but I feel like it actually is taking over a larger amount of space, including Sarah's mom within that. Otherwise, again, we're creating a lot of branching timelines and multi-universes, and it's going to get even more complex than what we saw with the division last season.
I'll
Or is it
have
just
to.
affecting the phone?
Hmm?
Or is it just affecting the phone?
Well, that wouldn't be affecting Sarah's mom's responses, would it?
Sarah's mom basically gets cut off, but she starts off saying the same thing.
Starts off saying things, but some of her responses are different because
Okay.
Sarah's responses are different. And if you go into Feynman's branching timelines and all, your branching timelines, or else she's got to be part of the loop so that she's experiencing this differently each time. She's just not learning from it as well as they are, obviously. Perhaps because she's not there to experience everything after Sarah hangs up. Just wondering, what the heck was that about?
I'll admit, I missed that. I thought it was the same conversation on the mom's side. So I'll have to, okay.
No, basically the whole thing about her beating her father and everything. But I had a little bit of a more explanation was added when the doctor is talking to the TARDIS. It was more of, let me find it. Thanks for looking after us. If you did, quite mysterious, really.
Mhm.
So was the time loop really caused because the TARDIS was being reset, or was the TARDIS doing something to actually affect this timeline?
Or was the TARDIS involved at all, and was someone else doing this?
Oh,
And we haven't
yeah.
had that answer yet.
We'll find out at the end of the 2 seasons, I guess.
Well, yeah, it might
Special.
be something that pays off in the centenary special. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think it was more likely just, again, a little bit of lack of Christmas in the storytelling. But
Heavens,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of the continuity problems if Doctor Who went on for a century.
well, we're almost 60% of the way there.
The BBC is there is no. Okay, fair point.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with at the 100th anniversary special, we'll have all 57 doctors and all that, as Matt Smith said during the intro to Day of the Doctor that showed in the theaters.
I'm still waiting for Hugh Grant to come back as a doctor. So,
And Dame Joanna Lumley.
Yeah, there we go.
For those that don't know, Joanna Lumley was made a dame yesterday at the Queen's Honors.
Oh, was she? Oh, good.
Yes. So, as well as Vanessa Redgrave. So,
Good.
yeah.
Hey. So, other scenes you liked, other scenes you didn't like, quotations. I did kind of like that. Do not flirt with my mother, please. Sarah tells Nick.
Yes. Yeah, we never seen that before. Jackie Tyler.
Mhm.
I gotta say, as much as I enjoyed the story, and I'm not gonna say it's my favorite story of all time, or maybe even my favorite of the Chibnall era, my favorite moment was actually the trailer for the Easter special. And we can talk about the Easter special more later, but that was the moment that really got me excited about Doctor Who in a way I haven't been in a few years.
Okay, let's get to that. But first, we've got one question from Natasha.
Mhm.
Basically, she was wondering what is different about the council room after the reset. I didn't see anything different. Other than it was no longer trailing these large
Well,
black webs.
there's still black stuff in there, but it seems to be more patched up and contained. And there was I can't remember if the hourglass on the console was there in previous seasons
Yeah,
or
it
not.
was.
But and mostly I think it was, Natasha, I think mostly it was just kind of resetting the profile back to where it was, rather than, or like to a previous reset point, rather than a major change.
Because there was a problem with a lot of
Right.
different doors appearing everywhere
Mhm.
too.
Right. It was kind of like we're using the reset point for where the TARDIS was, a season or two ago, to undo the damage of the flux to it or something, and resetting the profile back to that point.
and yeah, for me, I think it was just cleaning up the gray goose. And that being
Mhm.
said, I do not particularly like this console room. it's too small. I don't know. I'm not driving with it.
Well, I think you only have it for 2 more episodes because of the new producer or new production company and all that. I think you're going to see another big change to the console room.
Yeah.
Maybe RT Davis will unbox his console room and bring it back.
Or do another new design, which I don't think there's anything wrong with.
Yeah, because RTD's was coral, where this is more
Mhm.
crystal. So
Mhm. Yeah. Natasha says there is a pre-recorded panel called Evolution of the TARDIS Interior Edition. Well, they'll talk about a lot of these issues.
all right.
Okay.
So you can look for that on the schedule as well. Okay. All right.
So, well, do we want to get onto the trailer that was not shown on BBC America?
It is on YouTube if you haven't seen it, so you can look it up on there. It is on the Amazon streaming copy, embedded into the end credits, just where you would expect it to be on BBC One.
It's in several Facebook groups. So if you're in Doctor Who Infinity, they've shown it several times there.
So this is the Easter special is called Legend of the Sea Devils, and it involves a famous pirate in was it 19th century or 18th century China, but the Sea Devils are involved, or at least one Sea Devil, and we just get a quick shot of a Sea Devil face at the end, which does not look that different from the classic Sea Devil face, except it has facial expressions and the eyes move.
It's got a different costume.
Yeah, I've seen videos online of folks watching the show, like with their dads who grew up on the Pertwee era, and they see the Sea Devil, they just light up, and I felt the same way. And I gotta say, you know, for all the different stories we've done here during the Chibnall era, just the little snippet we've seen of this story in this few seconds of trailer is like the kind of Doctor Who story I wanted to see during this era, where you bring like a classic monster in a historical episode and done with these characters. And I'm really excited and looking forward to the story. I almost wish we had more stories that were kind of like this, but yeah, I mean, he did do some wonderful things with Sontarans and the Flux, but oh my God, they have the Sea Devils back finally. We had them in 73 in the Pertwee era, and they were back with the Silurians in the Peter Davison era, and we haven't seen them since. And I'm really looking forward to this. And let's also not forget that Chibnall is who wrote the story that brought the Silurians back during the Moffat era.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He wrote that 2-parter with Matt Smith and Amy Pond. So yeah. So to have him bring the Sea Devils back too, I guess it makes sense. Yeah. And you know, when he brought the Silurians back in that story, he was referencing some interesting ideas that came out of the New Adventures novels involving the Silurians and the Sea Devils, and we might well see some of that play in here again. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to this. I'm really excited.
And Jim basically does a good job with historical stories, so like I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
So I'll be the voice of dissent, and I am not.
And Alex froze.
Partly because I sort of lack that emotional. So partly because I lack that emotional connection with it. The other one is that I sort of like that in his first season, it was all new monsters. It was sort of nice, refreshing that he was sort of venturing off on his own. And then you had the Flux, which was almost nothing but rehash of old stuff. And I was sort of looking for a break and looking for something new. The historical context I do like. That's nice. But yeah, I would have preferred a new monster instead of an old. We've had enough old. I'm ready to shift gears and go back.
And then we'll have one more special after that. So who knows?
Right.
Who knows?
Or as John Pertwee said, who knows, and I'll be right.
Yeah. Yes, we're not going to do the tap the nose and say who knows. Yeah. Tom Baker.
Yep.
Any other things you'd like to see in the
Well, I will say
remaining
this
specials.
going forward, I think Russell is eager to go back to having Christmas specials. And I would really argue against that. I think the choice to move it to New Year's has made for stronger stories at the specials. And again, I appreciate that they've mainly done Daleks in the specials and not within the seasons themselves. Alex, what you were saying about the first season having all new monsters, the second season had some previous monsters, but also some new ones. I not having to do a Dalek story in the middle of the season means you get a chance to do some new things. You get to do more historicals, you get to do more other new monsters and do some new innovative things. And you can still bring the Daleks back for everyone that's got to have a Dalek story. Just do it as a special. Throw a big name guest star in there and do it as a big spectacle. That's fine.
Yeah, because the trouble with this Christmas episodes was trying to link the episode to Christmas. So
Mhm.
yeah, you might have the trees, you might have snow and the carols and Santa Claus, but how many different times can you do Santa Claus before it starts getting repetitious?
Yeah, and Britain has a history of doing Christmas specials for a lot of their programs, and they're designed to be light and fluffy, so it's something that the whole family can watch after the meal, the way Americans will sit down and watch an NFL game, apparently. And I like that when you come back a week later after New Year's, while people are nursing their hangovers, you can actually do something a little more serious with more consequences attached.
And all you need to do is have fireworks and it ties in with the New Year's Day.
Or you don't even have to tie it into New Year's if you don't want to, like End of Time Part 2. But just separating it by a week means you don't have that feeling that you have to tie it into this holiday. And the same thing with the Easter specials. I mean, they didn't go out of their way to make Planet of the Dead tie into Easter at all. And
Just basically have the chocolate.
Yeah, and I don't see the Legend of the Sea Devils is likely going to do that either. It's just this is just the time year we're going to air it. So I think separating it to New Year's Day keeps it within that season, so you've got some time off to watch it, but without having that baggage weighing down the story. Plus, I think they've exhausted their Christmas options anyway, as you said. So then they'll just be retreading things.
Yeah. And those of us who don't really celebrate religious holidays is like, oh, let's get away from that.
And that's some of it for me too.
Yeah.
I would argue Christmas is no longer a religious holiday, but that's me.
We are talking Britain and not the United States, though, and so that might be a little different there.
True. Very true.
All
So
right.
I think we're getting close to the time. Where can people find you? Are you going to be on the panels at Council Room 2022, Satellite 9, in person, virtual?
I'll be remaining virtual this year. Chris, my wife, is an urgent care doctor, and we're trying to just be extra careful to keep COVID from returning to our home. I've been there once already, and try not to pass it on to others. So we will be virtual. I'll be on 5 pre-recorded panels and 1 live panel Sunday at the convention on main stage. I won't be on main stage, but some of the other panelists will. I'll be remoting in from this room here at home. You can also find me on Discord a lot during the convention. Happy to chat with you on a whole variety of topics. Doesn't have to be Doctor Who. I'm a huge Lego geek. I've got a huge science background. Happy to chat about whatever.
Yeah.
You'll find me at the convention. I'll be doing on Saturday 1 panel on Target novelizations. For people who don't know, before the days of VCRs and DVDs, you had to go down to the store and buy yourself little books to get your Doctor Who fix. And then later on, I'll be talking about a very famous script editor of Doctor Who, Douglas Adams. And like I said before, my wife will be doing a knitting panel, so bring your knitting.
As Paul McGann famously said, bring me knitting. And I will be at the convention in person. I'll be in Artist Alley. I have 4 pre-recorded panels. I'll also be on Traveling with the Doctor. and social politics and Doctor Who, and I think a couple other ones, but I don't have them all printed off. And so stop by, visit the panels. Hope you enjoy the convention.